Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar, Maximising the Impact of Your TAs with Clicker. Thanks so much for joining me today. Just before we get started, a couple of things to let you know. First of all, the session is being recorded, so we will send you through the recording link as soon as it's available. Secondly, if you've got any questions during our webinar, my colleague Joe is ready to answer any of those in the Q&A box. So if you've got any questions for Joe, pop them into the Q&A box and he's there ready and waiting for you. So thank you for joining me. My name's Katie and I'm a Senior Education Consultant here at Crick Software. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jules Dolby. Jules is Head of English in a special school setting and an SEND advisory teacher. Over the next 30 minutes, Jules will be providing lots of ideas and insights from her own experience of using Clicker and talking about how now, more than ever, it is vital for schools to maximise the use of their TAs. So thanks for joining us, Jules. Perhaps we can start off by thinking about why you think the role of the TA is currently so important.
Hi Katie, thanks for inviting me in today. So yeah, TAs have always been important, teaching assistants, and in the recent few years there's been a lot of research on teaching assistants as well, which we'll look at today. But it's particularly important, I think, in the current climate of funding, where most schools are underfunded. One of the things that seems to be going, unfortunately, are teaching assistants in schools. So if schools can really use TAs to their as well as possible and to evidence them as well as possible, then hopefully we'll keep this fabulous resource of a teaching assistant. But there are ways and lots to do where we can ensure that teaching assistants feel valued, but also that they're doing the best job to ensure that our pupils are engaged in learning.
Brilliant, thank you. And what sort of research has there been about using TAs effectively and potentially the impact that this can have?
So some important research came out by Rob Webster called Maximising the Impact of TAs. It came out quite a long time ago now, but one of the unfortunate results of that, and I think it was translated slightly differently to how Rob would have wanted it, but that pupils who have got an EHCP, so in the old statement or the Educational Health and Care Plan, who had a one-to-one teaching assistant, did less well than pupils of a similar attainment without a one-to-one TA. So it started to show that actually having a teaching assistant for a pupil actually made sure that they made less progress than more. So that was a slightly unfortunate research results. But what it didn't mean, which I think quite a few schools then suddenly thought, right, okay, well, we'll get rid of all our TAs then, because all our pupils with SEN will do fine without them. And in fact, they'll do better, because that's what the research said. And that's not exactly what the research said, but it was very clear about how we can really use teaching assistants and maximise the impact of how we deploy our TAs, how they interact with our pupils, and how they prepare resources for pupils as well. So I quite like this. This is one of the resources. If you look up maximising the impact of TAs, you will get onto the website of maximising TAs. And on there, if you click on resources, there's lots of lovely stuff on there. And one of them is this poster, which I think is really nice because it shows the top step is that sort of clear getting to student independence, so the fact if they can do it themselves. So the default position of a teaching assistant really is to observe the pupil performance, allowing time and space for them to process and think and try the task independently. And then and TAs, what they talk about is TAs need to be comfortable with pupils struggling a bit and recognise that this is an essential component of learning. Again, some more research that came out was that often staff, and again, this isn't trying to put a downer on teaching assistants if there's teaching assistants watching, because this is actually to help you, but the pressure of getting through a curriculum and sometimes from the teacher even, or the teacher also pressurised in this, is that they're much more worried about task completion, so finishing the task, than they were with the actual essential component of learning, which is that struggle zone, thinking for yourself and trying out. So if we're just sort of sitting there doing the work for the pupils, then they're really the passenger. You know, I was talking about an analogy of driving a car, and we want the student to be driving the car and the teaching assistant and the help that they get to be the passenger. And that's how we want it. However, if you concentrate on staff, on task completion, and go down to the correcting at the bottom, or even worse than that, is doing the work for them, then actually the student becomes the passenger, and they can sort of look out the window really while you're doing all the driving and stuff. So it's thinking about that analogy, that they've really got to be in the driving seat. And so self-scaffolding is where we want to get to, and that should be the default position. You may, however, have to go down these steps to help our pupils get to self-scaffolding. So one underneath that is prompting. So the TA might intervene, a bit of a nudge. What do you need to do first? What's your plan? Come on, you can do this. Little tap on the shoulder if they've zoned out a little bit. Even just writing a little scaffolding or bullet points on a whiteboard, you know, just to help them, that they can tick off a task sheet. But again, allowing them to drive their own learning. After that comes cluing. So, and again, that idea that often pupils know the problem solving strategies that prompts are designed to elicit, but they find it difficult to call them to mind. So clues are a question or a small piece of information to help the pupils work out how much to move forward. And they should be sort of drip fed, sort of start with a small clue and then build it up, you know. So a little one. I always talk about often if people struggle with retrieval of information, so it's a big thing if you have dyslexia particularly, but retrieving that information, they've got it in there, but they just need a bit of a trigger to remind them. And so instead of saying, you know, whose family was Romeo, if you're doing Romeo and Juliet, which family does Romeo come from? That's a lot to try and get out of their brain, even if they know the answer. But if you say, is he from the Capulets or is he from the Montagues? You've given them those two words, so you've reduced their cognitive load, which is what you'll hear often these days, and then they can choose between those two. They've still got to get the answer right, so you're not giving them the answer, but you're cluing in. And it's that kind of really niche work that a teaching assistant has to, very skilled teaching assistants do, to elicit that information and support their pupils. The last two, not to say they're never to be done, but you've got modelling, and actually modelling is very effective. So problems and clues are less effective when pupils encounter a task that requires a new skill or strategy. So this is where modelling will come in. It calls for the layer 4, the modelling. TAs as confident and competent experts. They can model while the pupils actively watch and listen, and then try the same step for themselves afterwards. That's quite nice, you know, a bit like that sort of think, pair, share, or I do it first, we do it together, and then you do it. All those sort of modelling strategies are really useful. I was at college and I was teaching this student. He was 16. He was on a sort of level 2 course. I can't even remember what it was on now, and it was when I worked in an FE college, and he had ADHD, and he'd come with all these amazing ideas, but like about 50 slides for his presentation. And so I just talked him through, and actually he had his screen, and I was going, do you want me to help? And he said, no, I can do it myself. And so I just sat by him next door, and he was sort of saying to me things like, I said, well, tell me what you want to say then. And I was sort of making a PowerPoint at the same time on a subject I knew nothing about, so it was none of my work, but I was just sort of doing the scaffolding really. And then I remember at the end he looked at me and went, oh, can I use that one? And so, you know, because he had too many ideas in his head. So it's that sort of skilled help. Okay, and the final one is correcting, is where the TAs provide answers and requires no independent thinking. So you would avoid that, but sometimes just to get through the lesson you may have to do that, and that's a judgment call. This is lovely. So what we've just been talking about, you've got this lovely lanyard that you can print out and put on your lanyard on here, and then you can actually, at the back of your lanyard, you can sort of go remind yourself, oh, am I self-scaffolding? Should I prompt? Should I clue? You know, so it's really nice. It gives a little bit of things like the idea of prompting, where you wait 10 seconds. What's your plan? Wait for 10 seconds. Let them process. You know, of a statement is, it's a grey mammal, or question, what goes on the top right side of your page if you're writing a letter, that kind of thing. So it gives you lots of things. So I would really recommend printing these off and having them on people's lanyards to enable this sort of pupil engagement and reaching to that student independence.
And that was the website there, Jules, wasn't it?
Great, yeah. And that's the scaffolding card, but that's the website, Maximising TAs. So you just press on resources and you get all these lovely resources that you can use for with teaching assistants.
Brilliant. So we've had a look at the 5-step model. Can we think a little bit now about how Clicker can fit in with that model and some of the ways that you're using Clicker within your school, Jules, to support independent learning and working with TAs?
Yeah, so the Clicker for me, and you know, I always say I'm not on commission, but it's the perfect scaffolding. It's like a Word document, but so much more. You know, it's assistive technology, so it has some wonderful ideas. So yeah, just very quickly, you can type with a really nice font, very clear. If you put a full stop at the end, it will read it to you.
My name is Amy.
So they can hear as well what they've written, and that's really good for those that go, oh, that doesn't make sense, and then they can put another word in. So it's really good for that sort of proofreading. It's great for spelling. So if you make a spelling error, it's got a clever spell checker.
I like writing.
So you can hear it's wrong, and then they can go and they've got all these ideas of what it could be. And even if they can't read very well, they might go, well, I don't know which one it is. They can hear it, you know, so you can.
Rotting.
Yeah, so rotting, it's not that one.
Writing.
That's the one I want. So then you can go for the spelling. So it really helps them with their spelling as well. Yeah, and it's got predictive text. So a bit like you would do on your phone. So that really speeds them up. You know, if they're quite dyslexic and a slow typer, that's a real double whammy. So predictive text really speeds life up for them. And again, they can still hear it back. So just that is great, but as we'll see through this webinar, it does so much more than just this. But that alone is really useful. There is the microphone, Katie, isn't there, where you can, if you press the microphone, some of you may use sound buttons, and this is the equivalent of a sound button, so they can say what they want, so they can record. And they can say what they would like to say, and then it has a little red box then on there. You can stop it, and yeah, once you press done, you've got this little red box, and then you can just play what they've said. So that's for those pupils that they say lovely things. You go, great, now put it on paper, and they go, oh, and they can't remember. They do 3 words. You're like, oh, no, they said such amazing stuff. So they can put those in a speech bubble like that, and then they can keep hearing it back until they finally got their sentence.
And also, Jules, potentially useful there for TAs to leave learning prompts as well. If we are thinking about independence and how we can scaffold that support, TAs could actually record some learning prompts to reduce that scaffolding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? If they press on that and it goes, right, you know, write your name, you know, write a first line of the poem, or, you know, whatever, give them little activities to do, like a task board that they can hear. Fantastic. Yeah, that would be a great thing to do. Might try that, Katie.
We've also, of course, got lots of ready-made resources, and I know you use these widely, Jules.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan. I always say Clicker on there are a few software like Clicker, but for me, Clicker's the best one because of the learning grids. So if you go into learning grid resources, it's kind of like an online, it's like the Clicker version of Twinkle, but better really, because you can edit them and stuff. So yeah, you can see you've got English, math, science, geography, history, and then all these other ones. So there's so much there. I'll give you an example. I had to jump in on a science lesson just the other day because a teacher had to go very quickly, and they were doing germination. I just put germination in the learning grid, and my goodness, it was amazing. They had a book, and they had you know, we did so much. I looked, you know, if somebody had come in, they'd be thinking, wow, this teacher was amazing. And actually I didn't know much about germination at all, to be honest. So yeah, it was great. So yeah, so you can choose these, and what's fantastic is even if you haven't got exactly what you want on there, you can edit them. So I think you're going to show us some ideas there, aren't you?
Yeah, so we sort of picked the topic of science, didn't we, Jules?
Yeah.
Jumping on the back of what you've just said. Obviously, there's thousands of these within learning grids. We've just picked up a few examples today, but you can see that what we've got here is a connect set around the topic of magnetism. So a selection of vocabulary to help students independently select words and phrases within their piece of writing. And you can see that this one, we've already popped some pictures in for you as well. But you were talking, Jules, about sort of the simplicity of being able to edit these.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So you can look at this and you can just sort of say these are great sentence starters, you know, it really helps them. And then you've got these words, but just within seconds you can picturize. If you just press picturize, you can put images on the words.
Yeah, so we can choose our picture library. So we'll start with Quick Picks.
Yeah,
the built-in picture library here, and I can picturize that and pop all of my picture images in there at the click of a button.
Yeah, which is fantastic. If there are too many words there, so you may have a pupil that think actually they can only cope with 6 words, you can take off the 4 of them and then it will spread it out, so gives them less choice. So, you know, it's really good for differentiation as well, or adapting it for different children. So I would say you could use this for the whole class rather than just certain pupils. But you could adapt these word grids, the word banks, to ensure that each pupil's got, because that's a lot of words there, which is fantastic for some. And you might want to take some of the words off. But yeah, just to say, so we're a widget school as well. So when we picturize, we've bought an extra bit on Clicker so we can use widget. So instead of using Quick Picks, we'll go down to widget. And you can ignore high frequency words. That's quite useful sometimes, so you don't get a symbol for everything, and then just press picturize, and then our pupils will recognize a lot of these symbols in science anyway. So strong and bendy, they would have seen shiny and things like that. So actually a lot of these symbols, because we're a widget school and we do a lot with widget, they'll recognize those. So that's fantastic as well. It's built in for us. It's like magic. When I show new teachers how to do this, I showed an ECT the other day, she was like, oh, this is going to save my life, you know. So it's great. It's really good for teachers as well. But the big thing about this is if TAs can learn to do it, you can do this. So one of the things about TA deployment and maximizing TAs is preparation. So you can actually prepare these without, you know, the teacher can be putting the input on in the front and you can be preparing these at the time. So, you know, so you can have a teaching assistant picturizing or taking off a few words for the pupils they're working with, deciding which words would be useful for them.
And about how you did that, because this is your weekend news.
Yeah, so we started using this across the school, and again another ECT came in and said, oh, I'd shown a staff meeting some Clicker stuff, and she said, could we do weekend news? And I was like, yeah. So we went on to Learning Grids and found this on weekend news, so this isn't ours, but what we did, we changed the colors. So because we do something called a narrative intervention here, so across the school, so our who is orange. So we went into the who's and we just very quickly changed the color to orange, and we picturized the words, and then our what's is yellow. So we changed that to yellow. Our green was when, and our where is blue, and our feelings are purple. So we're able to really quickly make up a weekend news grid that we've now got on our T drive, which fits perfectly with our narrative intervention, which is we use it universally, so across the school. And then you can picturize these words. For some of our classes, they may only have a choice of 2 words. Some might have a choice of 10, you know, so you can change it depending on different classes as well. And yeah, so that's been fantastic. The other thing to say about this, if you're thinking about actually you do need some handwriting, you can print these off. So you could have a completely blank screen and just print off these grids, and then they can actually write taking these words as well. So you don't always have to be using laptops or iPads to use Clicker. It can be again preparation. So the TA could make one of these up, print it off, and then they've already got a word bank of all these words where they can start writing.
Fantastic. Do you think it's worth us having a look, Jules, at how simple it is to create one of your own word banks? Because you mentioned sort of TAs working alongside teachers.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. And again, I remember when I first started getting into assistive technology years ago now, I went into a special school and I was watching a class and I saw this TA. I was bowled over. I saw this TA just preparing materials for, actually it was a visually impaired pupil. So she didn't even sit with with him most of the time. She was in the corner preparing from the input. So the teacher was giving the input. She was just preparing word grids and assistive technology. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Because that people didn't need any help. They were equal to their peers. It's just that they couldn't see. So their barrier was, so it was just adapting those materials. So I do think we need to think about all our pupils like that, with that self-scaffolding. How much can we just prepare materials so that they can work independently? So yeah, so if a teacher's giving an input and a TA becomes confident enough to make up a word bank, Katie can show you how easy it is. So you can choose the type you want.
And we'll stick with our science theme, Jules.
Yeah.
Let's one around space this time. So I'll just pop some.
So if I were the teacher giving an input on space and Katie was the teaching assistant somewhere in the classroom, not necessarily sitting by the pupil, just creating sort of the vocabulary that I'm giving on the input. And then you can really quickly picturize it. Yeah, widget with widget. And just how quickly you can do that. Amazing. And then off they go. The nice thing to show as well, Katie, just quickly, so if that's your new grid for space, they can also switch to other words, can't they, on the green button, I think it is.
Yep, and of course, when we're starting to write, we can also use all of our other
all the other stuff
checker as well.
Yeah, so you've got, they can write sentences using their keywords. They can, they've got their predictive text, they've got the spell checker, they can put in speech bubbles if they want to, so they don't forget what they want to say. It's all there. I mean, it really is a full package.
You mentioned earlier, Jules, sort of ensuring that TAs are confident in supporting learners within the classroom and specifically around technology. So what suggestions do you have for ensuring that TAs are confident using any form of technology to support learning?
Yeah, and this is not just for Clicker, it's for all of it, is that I think particularly now with assistive technology becoming sort of ubiquitous really across the school, everyone's using it. It's really important not to worry about getting it wrong firstly, so just have a go. I've often learned stuff on Clicker by almost doing it with the pupils on the whiteboard, and we're doing it and you learn, oh, you can do that, and oh, that's interesting. And they love doing things like picturizing, so do it with the pupils. They'll probably overtake you and that's not a problem. One important thing to say about this as well is that it's a really great software for the pupils and for the teaching assistants, and not to worry about it, and they may overtake you, but also don't get into the trap of thinking, right, I'm going to give this student Clicker, we don't need TAs anymore, because they still need support getting there. They need support knowing how to use it, and playing with it. But so I would say it's a really just play, have a good old play. Give yourself a few things to have a practice. You could say to the teacher, or the teacher could say to the TA that, don't worry about, I might not use this word bank, but just have a practice making a word bank while I'm talking. Or can you try and adapt this word bank, or take off 4 words, just have a go at it. And actually the pupils will really get used to that as well. They love doing things like changing the voice, for instance, because there's lots of different voices, and you do need to give them the opportunity to do that. And I guarantee the older students will put swear words in and hear it, and you just kind of have to run through, get past that stage, and then show them how useful it is, and their confidence will increase because they're giving great work. It looks great, and you're removing the barriers that they have with their peers. So yeah, so just have a go at doing it. Don't worry about getting it wrong. There's nothing you can do to break it. And the most important thing is just to keep using it, because you forget very quickly.
And I know you're keen on sort of having assistive technology champions, or sort of Clicker champions within school.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice thing if you've got the capacity to have a couple that are really interested in being the assistive technologies, both students and teacher assistants actually, and then they can start championing it across the school. They can show others, they can do their own training sessions, or they can be somebody that people just come to and ask for help. Something we've done as well now, we've just sort of refurbished our staff room, and we've put a couple of desktops in there for that very reason, that sometimes teaching assistants might not have their own laptop, or they might not have the facility to practice. And so we're trying to give them access to sort of laptops and desktops, so that, you know, if they're not busy ever, they can have a practice, you know, and that's been really useful as well.
Great. And I know we've spoken before about TAs quite often being at the forefront of supporting spelling strategies. Should we have a little look at Clicker Analytics there?
Yeah, it's another thing that Clicker would be great for interventions, as well as because obviously teaching assistants do a lot of interventions as well. That is research evidence-based, that they make good impact for pupils if they're doing interventions. And this is a great way, if you've got a pupil that's doing some writing, of just very quickly having a look at it. Will tell you how much they've used the predictor, how much they've used, you know, sets and the spell check, how many words they've got wrong, and then they've gone back and corrected them. So this is lovely if you want some evidence to show that their spelling's improving, or to analyze what they really need. So from this, I'd be able to see that you know, there's a few spelling patterns that they need to know about here. So you can be analytical, you can work out what they're spelling incorrectly, and the type letters, so what they kind of, you know, you can see if it's incorrect or it's just a spelling error. So you can turn it off as well, so you can turn the spell checker off, see what they're like without the spell checker, and then turn the spell checker on. So again, that would be another way of building up evidence for using assistive technology in their exams. You know, so there's lots of ways you could do this, but yeah, you've got teacher notes, statistics. It's a really lovely piece of software, and again, I think just for their own peace of mind, to show something is really useful. But and you know, how great is that? I can teach them how to spell writing, and really, you know, and they've learned 2 words there with probably a spelling pattern at the same time.
So last couple of minutes, what would be some of your top tips for best practice, Jules?
So again, I think the best practice is really looking at that pupil engagement. So, you know, using your teaching assistants, or teaching assistants if you're watching, ensuring that you're not worried about task completion, that you're using lots of scaffolding techniques with Clicker and concept maps and questioning, and the way you support the pupils to ensure that they're engaged, but becoming as independent as they possibly can be. So you know, I think best practice is that we're evidence-based, but we're also we know our pupils really well, we know how to make them independent, and we, you know, using the research. And then how technology can fit into that, I think is really good, is best practice, because what we really want to do is remove the barriers, and this type of technology removes barriers for many pupils, and helps with everybody. So I think that, you know, that's best practice really. I do think I like the top one when they talk about giving space as well, because often pupils that need TAs, and they do need them, but they can sometimes feel a bit crowded, and, you know, almost they can't put a foot wrong because, you know, there's somebody there all the time. And so I think we have to think as well about those pupils when we can give them space, and can this equipment, you know, this technology give them space, so that one, they've got their own time to process, but also that they're just feeling a little bit more that they're identifying as their own learner without needing that teaching assistant next to them. It might be that you are their one-to-one, but they don't even know it. You know, they're at the other side of the room most of the time preparing the materials. And so and we all know those pupils that don't want their teaching assistant because they're embarrassed or something. So there's lots of ways you can support a student without actually sitting next to them and helping them complete the task.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Jules, for all of those ideas. Thanks for everyone for joining us today. I know some of you may already have Clicker. Some of you might just be starting to explore the possibilities of Clicker. I'm just going to jump over to our website just for a couple of final pieces of information. If you're looking at and interested in a Clicker license, perhaps you're not yet using Clicker in your school, I've just added our Clicker license options onto our website here that you should be able to see. So Clicker licenses are for 3 years. You buy a number of licenses as per the options you can see on the screen, and they work on laptops, PCs, iPads and Chromebooks. We will be sending out a survey straight after the webinar, and if you'd like to book in a demonstration to find out more about Clicker for your school, there is the option on the survey to book in a personalised demonstration. For schools that have already got Clicker, and Jules mentioned sort of some of the ongoing training and support that we offer there, there's also the option just going into our training section to book a customer care meeting. So if you've got some Clicker licenses and you want to speak to us more about the options for using Clicker, learn a little bit more about some of the features that perhaps you're not currently using, you can always book in a 15-minute meeting with one of the education team here so we can broaden your use of Clicker. And just finally, before we finish, I am also going to add our contact details here onto the screen for you. So you've got our telephone number and our email address, as well as the website if you would like any further information. So again, a final thank you for joining us. Please do complete the survey that pops up as soon as the webinar ends. Big thank you to Jules, and I really hope it's been useful and given you lots of ideas. So thanks everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, bye.